What is up, guys? Welcome back. Today I just wanted to give you a brief update on what's been going on with the Shelby. If you saw my last video, you saw that I was going out of town to get some wheels, and then if you saw the video before that, you would have seen that I had already taken off some of the stuff to get the headers in, and I mentioned that I was going to be removing the K-member next. So that is exactly what I have done already. I removed the K-member, I removed the old manifolds, and I actually already started to put on the new headers, but I ran into a few little issues that some of them have already been alleviated, and then the other, well, I'm going to go ahead and fix it today. But yeah, they're actually already on the car, and so I'm going to take you guys in the garage and show you exactly what stuff I took off and what you would need to do in order to take it off. And since the K-member is already out, it's easier to show you on camera. So yeah, we're going to go in the garage and I'm going to show you everything that's been going on. One sec. Alright guys, as I mentioned before, I have completely removed the H-pipe and the stock manifolds. What I actually need to do though is take off all those sensors and get them ready to be put onto the new pipes. You're going to want to take this off first, and you can see right there, that's where the bolt will go through. It would be like this, positioned this way. So it's in there. You just have to feel for it and you'll find it. Just remove that bolt and you're gonna wiggle this dipstick out. It's not gonna give you that many issues because it's pressed in there to fit. So whenever you remove it, it should come out without any issues. What I have heard though is that it is kind of a pain in the ass to get that back in there without messing up the O-ring on that input part of the dipstick. Remove this guy. This is going to be the brace or crossbar, cross member, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it's connected to the radiator support and the K-member. So there's going to be two bolts on this side, and there's going to be another two bolts on that side. You're going to take those out, and then you're also going to take off some bolts that come here and here. And once you undo those, you'll be able to completely remove this. Set it aside. It doesn't weigh more than about 5 pounds. It's not heavy at all. Set it aside because you're not going to need that right now. The next thing you want to do is remove the steering shaft. So you'll see there, I believe it's a 10mm bolt, but it's going to be going through here. It's going to be going right through here and through here. So just undo that bolt, set it aside, and you can wiggle the shaft out from this side. Just mark it so that way you know the orientation that it goes back into. In the car, you're going to undo two bolts that go on that that plate right there. You're going to do two bolts here, and you're going to set them aside. You're going to get underneath the dash, and it's about probably in this position right here. You're going to go in there and you're going to remove another bolt which goes into this guy right there. And you're going to undo that, slide it off, and then it should be hanging downwards. And then you can pull the actual shaft inwards into the car and get the shaft completely out of the engine bay. Now that you have the steering shaft out of the way, the next thing you're going to do is come on this side and you're going to undo this tie rod nut. You're going to completely remove it, soak it with WD-40 or PB Blaster. That's what I did, and it helped out a lot. Once you remove this nut, turn it upside down and thread it in a couple times to where it's kind of flat with the end of the stud, and then hit it with like a 4-pound hammer, and it should come out like within 2 or 3 hits. Then you can press down and remove it completely off of the spindle. This is going to be the ball joint, and it has a bolt going through with the spindle and also a nut on the other side. So just completely remove that. You're going to hit the side of it with the 4-pound hammer as well,
And then you're going to use a pry bar or your own body weight. I prefer a pry bar because that's what I did. And push down on this lower control arm to get it off of the spindle. I don't know if you can see now, but it moves up and down. So there's a lot of tension from the actual bushing on there. So you're going to need to use some pretty good force. You're going to do the same exact thing on the driver's side. And then once you got that out of the way, the next thing you're going to do is move over to the motor mounts and remove these nuts from the motor mounts on the driver's side and on the passenger side. Remove those nuts completely because you're not going to need those. You're going to remove the actual clips that go to the steering, the electronic steering and all that. Remove those two clips right here. Not too hard because you might break one, so just be careful whenever you're removing those. After that's done, you're going to have 2 bolts on this side. Those 2 bolts will be connecting to the undercarriage of this car right here. And then you're going to do the same for this side on the passenger side. After you've broken loose those 4 bolts, you're going to move on to the other 2 bolts from the front side of the K-member, which are right here and right here. You're going to break those loose. Then move over to the driver's side. Same thing over here and over here. Break those loose. And I would recommend turning them about 50% out. Remove them enough to actually see if there's any play. And once you have enough play, you can actually start setting up the jack underneath there. So that way you can cradle the K-member and have it ready to be completely removed. But before you do all that, ensure that you have the engine and trans supported adequately. You can use my method if you want. There's tons of other methods you can use. The best method there is to get an engine support beam and have it up top. I haven't bought one, and so I just decided to use this method instead. It seemed to work fine. What I used was a scissor jack on the trans towards closer towards the bell housing. Then I used an actual RV jack. I don't know if you're able to see that, but it's an RV jack. It's rated for a lot of weight, but I went ahead and used that instead for the front of the engine. And so I used that on the rear side of the oil pan with 2 blocks of wood. And on the front, I used another jack with a block of wood to support the front part of the oil pan. I forgot to mention that you're going to also need to take off this crossbar that goes across the rear side of the K-member. There's 2 bolts, or actually 2 nuts there. There's another couple of nuts right there too. Just remove those, especially if you have a jack, scissor jack in the middle that is supporting the engine, because that's going to get in the way. After you have your jack underneath the K-member and it's supported and you can drop it, remove all the bolts and nuts and lower the jack, get it out of the way. You have your engine supported and you can completely remove that out of the way. Next thing you're going to want to do is tackle the motor mounts. So this guy right here is the driver's side motor mount, and there's 4 bolts on here. You're going to remove those 4 bolts. These look like 13s. So just remove those and get this motor mount completely out of the way. Same thing you're going to do on the passenger side. You're going to do the same thing there. There's 4 bolts there as well. Except on this side, you're going to have a stud and a nut. So one of the grounds is going to be hooked up on here, and then you're going to have this actual nut that goes over it. So just be cognizant of that, and be sure you take off those 2 in order, and then completely remove the motor mount and set it aside. Next thing you want to do is remove the 3 bolts for the starter, and you can just leave it hanging like I did right there. It's not a big deal. Now that you've done all that, you're able to completely remove the manifolds from each side. And then I talked about the EGR nut last time. All the nuts are easily accessible, especially with the stock manifolds, so you can get a hold of all of them underneath the car, while the motor mount, the starter, the K-member, and all that stuff is out of the way. So take your time with that stuff. Soak them with PB Blaster or WD-40 as well. And then completely remove all of them, set them aside, because you will more than likely use some of them, but not all of them. After you've done that, set them aside and then get ready to start putting the new headers on. But what you want to do first before you put the new headers on is you're going to use some O2 extenders, and the header company that you use should supply you with some. The ones I use sent me the wrong ones. These are GM, but just imagine these being for Ford, because I already installed mine on the car, so you won't be able to see them. But put these on first. They sent me the wrong ones. These are actually 4 pins. I don't know if you're able to see in there. These are actually 4 pins, so I needed 6 pins. And so they sent me the correct ones, and they're in there. So you're going to want to, on the driver's side, you're going to want to get underneath the car and use one hand. And what you're going to do is kind of like use the bottom part of the hand to hold the clip, the extender clip, and the top part of your hand to get a hold of the actual clip connected to the trans. And so you're going to try to like squeeze those two together and get them in there. So just look at the shape and pattern of both the male and the female plug, and just kind of line them up as best as you can in that same orientation. On the passenger side, so on the passenger side, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, but you're able to do it from above the car. So from here, you're going to snake your hand in there. You won't be able to see it because this EGR tube is in the way. But actually, let me see if I can pull it up a little bit. So you'll be able to see this side of the clip. This side of the clip is on here, but you won't be able to see the other end of it because it's already clipped in. So you'll have to use the same method. Snake your hand in there. Now you can actually start putting the headers in there and getting some studs and some bolts lined up. What I did for the passenger side. So with the passenger side, if I'm not mistaken, I think on the very bottom lower header towards the firewall of the engine, I used a bolt, and then the rest of them I believe were studs. You want to thread in the bolt portion at least about 50%, and on the top part of the headers, remove the studs completely, because you're going to throw the header over and clip it onto the bolt and the rest of the studs. And once you have that done, you can go ahead and start threading in the nuts and then thread in the bolt some more. On the driver's side, what I did was same thing, completely remove all the studs on the top portion of the header, and on the bottom portion of the header, I used 2 bolts on the very bottom closer to the firewall. And I went ahead and went in from under the car, lifted the header above, and slid them onto the bolt portion and the rest of the studs. The very bottom closer to the firewall, because those are going to be really tight fit, and they will actually hit the tubing on the headers if you use studs. You can always clip the stud or use a Dremel to shave it off, but you're going to need to get in there, because you're going to need to tighten it with the hex end of the portion first into the actual head before you can thread on those nuts. And if you do that, then you're kind of stuck in a dilemma if you want to remove the studs, because you won't have an hex portion. You'll have to use like a easy out or something to get that stud out. So I just recommend using the bolts instead. And then, like I mentioned before, slide the header above and slide it onto the bolts on the bottom, the bolts and the studs on the bottom. But you're going to want to thread in those bolts at least 50%. Then that'll give you like enough room to actually go in there and just start tightening it up to fine adjustments that you need to. That is actually it for the headers. But then you're going to want to snake in the new oil dipstick, which I would recommend getting a flex one like I did. I've read too many horror stories about having to bend and bang up the stock one. You will have to make some adjustments though, because if you look at these two and you line them up O-ring per O-ring, you'll see that the actually you won't be able to see it now, but let me see if I can do it now. You'll see that the aftermarket one is a little bit taller, so you'll have to like use a Dremel and engrave some notches on the new one to have like the correct OEM readings. And I'm okay with doing that because I just didn't want to fight with that dipstick all day, so that's what I'm doing. After you have that done, you can pretty much tighten everything up and make the final adjustments before putting the K-member, the motor mounts back, and everything else you need to back in. I just want to give you a quick update on what's going on. Some of the snag ups I ran into were having the O2 extenders being the wrong form, so that took a few days to get the correct ones in. Also, they sent me the wrong header bolts. These are grade A header bolts, but they look like they're for GM. And so if you compare them side by side with the ones that I actually need, they're actually these. These are also grade A. bolts, but the correct size, pitch, and pattern that I needed. You can tell that this one's slightly smaller or thinner than the other one that they supplied me with. So that's what I went ahead and used. Got correct bolts that I needed. And you're going to need to use an assortment of bolts and studs because you're going to want to have something to line up with before you get that header back in. Also, be sure to label the orientation of the gaskets. I reuse my gaskets. Ford OEM gaskets are probably the best ones to reuse if you have any, especially if your vehicle's low mileage, which in this case is going to be a 10,000 mile vehicle. So I don't have any concerns reusing the gaskets, and that's what I did. And just be sure you label the orientation and the way they go back onto the head, like which do the serial numbers face outwards or inwards. In this case, the serial numbers face outwards, and the flat side or the blank side is going to face the head of the motor. And so just, yeah, keep that noteworthy, and be sure you have the correct orientation. I plan to wrap this up sometime this week, maybe today or tomorrow, and then also get these new guys on there, which are the new wheels that I ordered for this car. Well, I didn't order them, but I picked them up out of town last week, as you saw in the video.
Alright guys, that'll actually do it for today's video. The purpose of this video was just kind of give you an update and insight as to what I went through putting the headers on and removing all the old parts, especially the K-member. I know when a lot of people hear that you have to remove the K-member, they get scared away right away. It seems like a lot of work, but it's really not, guys. It's not if you have the right tools and if you have the right information. It's super easy to get through. You won't have any issues. The main thing though is having the right tools. That's what really helps a lot. And I've been doing my own work for a long time already. And instead of paying for somebody else to do the job for me, I always just thought, why not allocate that money towards tools as an investment, so that way next time I need to do another job, I'll have tools to do that as well. And I just kept doing that over and over, and I've gone through a whole bunch of stuff. I had actually a few different 03, 04 Cobras, probably like about 4 of them. And the last one that I built was an 04 Cobra. It had the 9 thread heads. So that one I built from the bottom up, did the whole fuel system. I've changed about a bunch of clutches. I've done head studs while the motor's in the engine bay. I've done blower swaps out the yin yang, intercooler stuff, heat exchangers, flushes, removing the differentials, wheel hubs. Pretty much like everything you could think of minus pulling the engine out of the car. I just don't have the room for that here. Over time, instead of just paying somebody to do it, I just did it myself and allocate that money towards the tools that I'm gonna need for it. So that's why I have a lot of tools here, and it's helped out a lot tremendously. So this is actually my second 2013 Shelby. My last one was a black one, and I was fortunate enough for it to already have came with headers. It came with full exhaust. It was stainless works. I'll probably drop a clip after this to show you what it sounded like, but it was a pretty fun car overall, but I didn't have to do much to it because it was already all done for me when I bought it. But with this new Shelby that I have, like I mentioned before, it only came with the Corsa axle back, and so it was really quiet, and it got boring fast. So the car sat a lot. I didn't really drive it much, and I decided I'm just gonna get some headers, and that's where we're at right now. We're doing the headers. So hopefully after these headers are installed with the X-Pipe and then plus the wheel combination, I'll be driving this car a lot more often than I was before. With that being said, I'm looking forward to the content that I'm gonna be producing for this car, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Just to recap, doing the K-member is not that hard. It's about 2, 4, 6, 8 bolts you got to remove from it, and then you got the other stuff that connects to it that you got to take off as well. Like I mentioned before, all that stuff is in the video. Scan it over. Like I said, if you have any questions, hit me up. Next video we'll have a full sound clip giving you guys first dibs of the first startup after these headers are already installed, and first cold startup since I put the car on jack stands. And I'll also have clips of the car with the new wheels on there, which I'm super excited to see because that black on black stripes is gonna look so great with the dark sterling gray color. I feel like a hyper bright satin color wheel makes the car a lot more like a classic muscle car type of look, but with the black wheel on there, it just gives it more of a menacing look. So I'm super stoked to see what it's gonna look like once those wheels are on there and settled on the ground, along with the new parts that I'm gonna be putting on there, which I will also introduce in the next video as well. So let's all reconvene back in about a week or two, and you all should have a good glimpse of all that new stuff. and we'll talk about it all. So yeah, I'll see you guys on the next video.
1, 2, 3.